So I'm going to be a little bit controversial today and look at the full frame look. Is it real, or are we having the wool pulled over our eyes a little bit? We have a lot of camera manufacturers right now all pushing their latest full frame cameras as it being the latest and greatest thing that will transform the way you shoot, transform the way your images look. But how many of these claims are actually true and correct? One thing you hear all the time is people saying, I love the full frame look. But what exactly is the full frame look? For a very long time, people have been using cameras that have a super 35mm sensor and adding an adapter on it to use full frame lenses so they get the same field of view on their super 35 camera as that full frame lens would produce on a full frame camera. So is this a different look? If I put that full frame lens on a full frame camera, does it somehow look different to putting the full frame lens with the adapter on a super 35mm camera? Well, the reality is actually no, there is no difference. Well, rewind, hold up a minute. There might be a difference because it depends on the adapter. So the adapter is going to introduce some optical distortions into the image that aren't there with just the lens. So the lens plus adapter on a super 35 camera will look a little bit different to the lens on a full frame camera. In reality, the full frame look is simply down to the optical qualities of the lens that you're using. And the one thing a large sensor does give you is the ability to get a wider field of view for any given focal length. And the add-on or roll-on effect from that is that the depth of field, because you're using a longer focal length to get the wider field of view, will be shallower for that field of view at any given aperture. So that may be a benefit. You may be able to achieve a wider field of view with a shallower depth of field, but that's simply because you're using a longer focal length. If we look at when you use an adapter to use a full frame lens on a super 35mm camera, typically they're called a speed booster. One of the things that you also gain is that effectively, because of the way the lens compresses the image, making it smaller and thus brighter, the lens becomes around one stop faster. So that same lens again in super 35 via an adapter gives you the same field of view and the same depth of field as it would do directly on the full frame sensor. So you have to think very carefully about this whole full frame look thing, because there isn't actually such a thing as a full frame look. It's not something unique. You can get very similar looks at any size of sensor. It all really comes down to the quality of the lenses that you're using, and generally lenses made for full frame tend to be very high quality, so they tend to produce nice looking pictures. But there's no reason why you can't achieve a very similar look or almost identical look in most cases on a super 35 sensor. Now, the one thing that having a bigger sensor does definitely bring you is for any given resolution you can have bigger pixels, and that allows you to have greater sensitivity and bigger dynamic range. And that's part of the reason why the camera manufacturers are pushing for bigger sensors, because of those reasons. But for a look, no, there's no such thing as the full frame look.